Hey guys, what's up? It's Jess. Welcome back to Roots and Refuge Farm. I'm in my garden and today I want to share a little tip with you guys about the most foolproof way that I know to plant carrots. When you read lists from gardening resources that list off super easy to grow varieties, carrots usually don't make the cut. Carrots can be a little bit tricky, but that doesn't mean that you can't grow them. There are just a few things you should know, like the fact that carrots won't germinate if it's over 80 degrees. So if you're starting to grow these in a summer garden and you live in a really warm place, it doesn't matter how well you sow them. If it's hot outside, they're not going to go very far. Also, they need to be at least 40 degrees to germinate very well at all. You need at least a little bit of warmth to get them up out of the ground. Right now I'm sowing these carrots in February here in zone 7B. Our ground is not frozen, but it never really freezes, and we've been having a pretty mild winter. However, if it does drop below freezing again, the carrots will be fine. They can handle a little bit of frost, so I feel pretty good about sowing them right now. For us though, we can't grow carrots through the summer because it's far too hot. They don't develop any sort of root if they're grown through the summer. They pretty much just develop tops and then they go to seed, putting off flowers and seeds. So they're definitely a spring and a fall crop for me. Aside from a general pickiness over the temperature, carrot seeds themselves are just a little bit difficult to deal with because they're tiny, teeny tiny, which makes them a little hard to space and also hard to maneuver, and it makes them very easily misplaced. You can't plant carrot seeds very deep at all because they won't have enough energy whenever they sprout to make it to the soil if they're planted too deeply. And the other thing is they require pretty constant moisture to germinate, and it takes them, with everything being ideal circumstantially, about 11 days to come up out of the soil. So as you can see, there are a lot of factors and it still is a long germination. So you kind of have to maintain those ideal factors for long enough. So I learned a tip. I had several people suggest this, and I have found this to be the most surefire way to sow carrot seeds. To sow your carrots, you're gonna need a space that has nice, loose soil. Carrots will grow in soil that is less than ideal, like if you're dealing with clay soil, but they just don't grow well, and they certainly don't grow pretty. If you want nice straight carrots that aren't forked, that don't have 3 legs and all of that, you're gonna need pretty obstruction-free soil. I'm growing them in my raised beds. I have really great success growing beautiful carrots in raised beds with good soil. But if you're growing them in the ground, it can work too, but you just want to make sure your soil is as nice and loose as possible. The other thing you're gonna need is a board. I like to use an untreated board. That really doesn't matter the size, it just depends on how many carrots you're wanting to grow. The reason why you want it to be untreated is you're gonna set this on top of your soil and your seedlings, your seeds as they come up to seedlings, for 2 weeks or so. There's a lot of yucky chemicals in treated wood. So an untreated board, whatever size area you're trying to grow carrot. And what I've done here is I've just taken this board and pressed it into the soil so I kind of can see an indentation, so I have the size of the board in mind. You can see here I just flipped it over, pressed it in, so I've got a line. I know what kind of space I'm planting here, and I just flipped it over, and now I'm actually going to take my watering can and water this first. Soil's good and loose. I've raked it up a little bit with my fingers. It was already nice and prepared for planting. It was weeded. And I'm gonna go ahead and water this really well so the soil is nice and soaked. Now I want you to notice here as I'm watering this that because it's not perfectly even, there's some run down into these areas, some runoff. And that's the kind of stuff that makes carrot sowing so difficult, because if I had planted those seeds first and then watered it, they would have all washed down into that area and I'd had a clump of carrots come up in that one area. But the way we're gonna do it is going to help avoid that. Because the thing is that even if you have a really great garden, you're gonna have just these tiny little rivets in the soil that happens, and that's one of the reasons why this can be difficult. So what I like to do is just get my seeds in my hand, not a ton of them, but enough, and just go ahead and start spacing them. And I'm not actually even putting holes. What I do is just drop the seed and just barely press it into the ground. I'm actually not covering it. I'm just barely pressing it into the ground so that it sort of sinks down into the soil. I'm planting these about every 1.5 inches, and it's really hard not to drop more than one seed. That's okay. We can thin them, and we will thin them as they start to germinate, but we are going to end up thinning them. So this is one of the reasons why I don't like to just broadcast them, because I like to do as little thinning as possible, and also just like to waste as few seeds as possible. For me, dropping the seeds onto the soil that's already wet and just pressing them down, I can actually still see them there, but I'm just pressing them down into the soil. And I'm actually going to do that about every 1.5 inches for the entire space here that I'm going to put this board over. So if you'll see here, my planted carrots look something like that. They literally are just seeds that I've pressed right down into the soil, and you can still see them. The next step, and I've got to move my irrigation tubes here. We're in the process of doing that. So I'm going to take this and just flip it right over the top of the seeds that I just planted, and just give it a good press to make sure it's coming in contact with the soil. And so I remember what I've got here. Stick that little marker. Those are black nebula carrots. Now the idea of putting this board down is that it's going to keep my seeds in place. It's going to keep the soil moist. It's going to keep it from getting too hot in the sun. And also, if we get a big rain, which is forecasted for us here in the next couple days, I know that my seeds aren't going to wash away. The water will soak into the soil. It'll actually help keep the soil moist where they are, but because that board is over them, it's going to keep them from washing off. Now we'll come back and check on these. You want to start checking for sprouts about 5 or 6 days after you plant them. It's pretty unlikely for it to be that soon, but because when those sprouts do come up, they're going to need light soon. So you don't want to risk them coming up and then dying because they can't photosynthesize. So we're definitely going to start checking in 5 or 6 days. I'm expecting it to probably be more like 10 or 11. As soon as they start sprouting, well, I'll just show you what to do next when that happens. I'll see you here in a few days. Alright guys, it's been 16 days since the first half of this video, and I just removed my board, and I want to show you guys what I'm seeing. Okay, you guys see all these little sprouts here? I know it's probably hard to see exactly what you're looking at because they're really pale since they haven't had sunlight much yet, but there are lots and lots of sprouts coming up here through the soil. That's super exciting. Great germination rates. I see lots and lots of little sprouts. I, just out of my own curiosity, I actually didn't make a video about it, but the day that I sowed these underneath this board, I actually just went and sowed some the exact same way without covering them in one of my other beds, just because I was curious to see. And I've been watching that area as well, and I cannot find a single germinated seed. We've had a lot of rain, and so they probably got displaced or buried too deeply. Let's go up to the greenhouse really quick to talk about this because it is very windy. All right, I just wanted to come in here and talk about a few things, kind of head off some questions that I could see you guys having. I wanted this to be as clear as possible for you. First things first, you may have noticed that I had a row cover on my garden bed. Had I thought about it, I probably would have shot this video and planted these carrots in a different garden bed, just so there would be no confusion. That, actually, we put that up a while after I sowed these carrot seeds. I don't think that row cover had anything to do with the success of the germination underneath that board. However, we have some really cold days coming up. I did sow a lot of seeds in that bed, and now that I've removed the board and I have those tiny little seedlings, I'm glad they have an extra little bit of protection from the cold. But I don't want you guys watching this video and getting through to the end going, oh man, I can't sow carrots like this because I don't have row covers. That has nothing to do with the germination. I've sowed seeds under the boards before with no row cover, and they germinate just the same as these did. Another thing that I wanted to address was watering. I have not watered those seeds a single time since we sowed them together 16 days ago. We've had a lot of rain, quite a lot of rain, and even though that board was covering those, obviously the soil was staying pretty moist because of rainfall. If at some point you're trying this in circumstances where your soil is drying out and you're lifting up, the first thing that I would do is I would make sure the board is flat on the ground, and with something like a watering can, I would water all around it. Really feel like the surface of your soil needs some moisture underneath that board. Lift it up and use a spray bottle. Really the whole point of the board is to keep the seeds from being displaced and to make sure that they stay in the right conditions, and so it defeats the purpose if you lift it up and water it with a hose. Another thing, just a piece of information that I wanted to pass on because I had read this a while ago. It's always been in the back of my mind, but I've never felt like I needed to do this. I had read a tip when you're sowing carrots underneath a board that if you realize that they've sprouted, and so you're going to take the board off. You don't want to leave it on too long after they've sprouted because they'll die. They'll run out of energy. They need the sunlight. But let's say you realize that, but you also realize that you have a really big thunderstorm coming through or rain showers coming through, and you're worried that those little delicate seedlings are still going to be at risk of being washed away. One thing that you can do, I've never done this because I've never felt the need to, but you can take your board and prop up the ends of it with like some bricks or blocks or rocks or something, so essentially it's up off the ground some inches but still over the top of your seedlings. And essentially what that's going to do is allow enough light in that they can live but protect them from any heavy rainfall. Obviously that would be circumstantial that you would even need to do that. I've always just taken it off and that's been fine, but I could see kind of being in a dilemma of being in a place of having a lot of heavy rain but realizing that your seedlings are making their way up, and that might be a solution I wanted to give you guys in case you find yourself in that situation. Overall, I think this is a really great method to overcome some of the struggles of honestly a variety of plant that is difficult to germinate. Carrots can be difficult because they're so finicky about being not getting dry and not getting too deep. They're so easy to misplace. So I just wanted to share this with you guys, and hopefully it will bring success to your growing endeavors. Homegrown carrots really are amazing, especially compared to their store-bought counterparts, and I would love for you guys to all get to experience that. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I bless you. Until next time.